This is Gov Exec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's July 5th, 2022. I'm Ross John Fortuné. Leadership is hard. Managing people, tasks, and mission is especially hard in the public sector. It can be stressful, challenging, and complicated. In the oversaturated environment, taking cues from the world of mindfulness can help focus and improve leaders' skill sets in doing their jobs. As a practice, mindfulness can help bring a leader's attention in the present moment through training like meditation. It can move managers to respond with more purpose and attention, making them better leaders and more effective doing their jobs. Leaders need to make good decisions, communicate well with their coworkers, and regulate their stress and emotions while doing their work. Mindfulness skills are, according to our guest today, an important foundation for those skills in the public and private sectors. Andrew Feldman is the founder and principal consultant at the Center for Results-Focused Leadership, which helps public agencies use evidence, data, and strategy to improve results. He also hosts the Gov Innovator podcast. And Rabbi Marc Margolius is the senior program director at the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. He hosts the Institute's daily mindfulness meditation sessions and teaches an online program called Awareness in Action, which is designed to cultivate character through mindfulness. They have a piece on our site right now headlined Government Leadership and the Power of Mindfulness. After a short break, they'll join me to discuss how mindfulness can help leaders in their jobs and their lives. Want to hear more from GovExec, NextGov, Defense One, and Route 50? Tune in to our virtual events to hear interviews with government leaders about the most important topics today, including the federal workforce, health IT, artificial intelligence, 5G, and more. Visit govexec.com/events to learn more. Leadership, particularly in the public sector, requires a slate of skills. Decision-making, communication, and many other strengths are key to managing mission and people. Underlying so many of these skills is mindfulness, even if it doesn't immediately come, pardon the pun, to mind. Our guests today have a piece on our site headlined Government Leadership and the Power of Mindfulness that outlines the ways leaders can benefit from practicing mindfulness. Andrew Feldman is the founder and principal consultant at the Center for Results-Focused Leadership, which helps public agencies use evidence, data, and strategy to improve their results. He also hosts the Gov Innovator podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Russ. Good to be with you.
And Rabbi Marc Margolius is the senior program director at the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. He hosts the Institute's daily mindfulness meditation sessions and teaches an online program called Awareness in Action, designed to cultivate character through mindfulness. Rabbi, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks so much, Russ.
So let's start with you. What is mindfulness? How do you explain it? And how do you define it? And how is it useful?
Well, I think in the simplest terms, mindfulness really is quite accessible because all it really has to do with more easily said than done is paying attention to what is actually happening in the moment right now. And especially in an age where there's so much distraction because of all the devices and screens, et cetera, we have particular challenges in this regard, but mindfulness is really just kind of waking up to what's happening in this moment in multiple dimensions, and in our bodies, in our surroundings, in our mind, in our reactivity, just becoming more aware of self and others and context in the moment by moment.
Andy, how did you get involved with this? I know you co-wrote this, but how did you get involved with mindfulness? How did you get involved with this whole part of study?
Well, I kind of applied a term for myself, which I'm pretty open about, which is I'm a recovering non-contemplative person. Because I think in my past, when setbacks would occur or sadnesses or stimuli of some kind, being upset, I think I dealt with it by trying to be busy, or running from those emotions. And I think it really took a realization at midlife. Maybe that's generous math at 48, but to really the importance of sitting with those emotions, understanding them. Marc uses the phrase often of responding rather than reacting. And I think that's such a nice way to encapsulate what this is. And so I'm very much I'm very much a student on this subject rather than an expert on this podcast, but hopefully my experiences can help. And also, I realized how important these strategies would be for government leaders, which we can talk about.
Sure. Before we get to that, though, I do want to talk a little bit about the 3-step approach, Marc, that you bring forward, sort of via Viktor Frankl, sort of a famous in the circles I run in, I guess I should say, as a Jewish person, sort of teacher and such. Can you give us a short rundown of what that looks like, how it frames mindfulness, and how you use it?
Sure. So if mindfulness is really the capacity to be with what's happening in the moment, not pushing it away, as Andy was describing, not pushing away unpleasant emotions or undesirable thoughts, but actually, even just for a moment, being able to be with it, or even a microsecond being able to be with it, not find it intolerable. You might think about that as creating a space. And so there's a quote attributed to Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, but and writer, a psychoanalyst. And the quote is that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our freedom to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom, which is just doesn't quite fit in a bumper sticker, but it's a great synopsis for what the whole practice is. So step number 1 in this 3-step process is really just creating or allowing for some space. That is, before we respond or react to stimuli, we allow things just to be, even for a microsecond. And in that microsecond, instead of reacting from a hardwired place of habit, which as the years go on become ever more ingrained, we create a little bit of space to consider the possibility of responding in a way that's different than our habitual reaction. And that doesn't mean we're going to take that choice, but we have a moment at least to discern what's the wise thing to do in this moment? What is the wise choice? Frequently, we might run through that red light and say, like, yeah, I can say that would be better, but I don't care. I'm going to do this anyway. But if we can begin simply by having that space and noticing the stop signs or the green, seeing if the light is red, green, or yellow in the moment, then we can bring online, hopefully, the qualities that we have, which from my perspective are innate qualities. So we all are kind of factory equipped with wisdom to make sound, wise choices. But we, out of habit, fear, anxiety, often react in unwise ways. So this is an opportunity to basically, this is applying mindfulness moment to moment so that hopefully we can make wiser choices. And I just want to also add that we have to allow for a lot of error. That is, that our habits are so strong and so deeply ingrained that it may be the best we can hope for is to change the decisions, or be able to make decisions even a small percentage of the time more than we might otherwise. So out of the next 100 times, I'm presented with a situation where I usually react unwisely, or say unwholesomely. If 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times out of those next 100, I might freely make a decision that's a wiser decision. In my book, we're doing great. So there's a lot of room for error here.
That's good for somebody like me who makes a lot of errors. That's always good to hear, for sure.
It's a big club.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's sort of talk specifically about leadership. Let me just sort of pick into that a little bit more. How does mindfulness help in the leadership sort of category? Marc, we'll start with you.
Well, I think leaders carry a lot. First of all, just the definition of leadership is that you're holding responsibility. And I think for some people that might not feel like much. It might be an easy lift, but for a lot of people, I think the awareness of responsibility can probably generate some degree of anxiety. The stakes are higher, right? The decisions are more significant. They affect more people. There's a lot at stake. And we may not be aware of that anxiety. So leaders in particular, I think, might benefit from this approach, which enables us to grow in awareness of what we're actually holding. And also another thing that I didn't mention, which is that this practice really involves applying a lot of self-compassion, training ourselves and being compassionate on ourselves rather than harshly judging ourselves. The theory being that if we're able to do that, actually, instead of powering through difficult things or forcing the wheel, that we're able to kind of loosen things up so we can make wiser decisions. So, for example, for a leader might say, like, I carry a lot, and it's not easy. It's not easy to be a leader. If we can start from that place, then actually you might be able to feel more free, feel more compassionate, be willing to take some risks and be willing to fail, which is also, and to acknowledge failure and to try again, which is a great model in general for those one is leading, to create a context that feels safe for experimentation, that allows for suboptimal results, as long as you're learning from them. That's basically creates a learning environment, which I think is essential for a leader to do and to model.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly a huge part of leadership is modeling those kinds of behaviors. Now, we'll sort of finish up on this specifically for our audience. And Andy, you have some experience in this. How can government leaders, managers, people in those positions use these kind of lessons to better bring about mission and bring people together?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's kind of the day-to-day in the immediate application, and I think there's a longer term one too. But in the day-to-day, government leadership positions, and by that I mean just anyone with a position of responsibility, from the front office to just a manager, an advisor. These are busy jobs, as this audience very well knows. These are jobs where you can get to 2:00 and finally you're opening up your brown bag lunch, after meeting after meeting. And in those situations, or even if it's not that dramatic, in those situations, you can start taking shortcuts. And we all have kind of an invisible grab bag of responses that we carry with us. And when we are, whether you say triggered or there's some stimuli there, you reach into that grab bag and pull out what's most familiar. And I think part of this process, as Marc has described, is lengthening the space between stimuli and response. And we include in our op-ed an example of a branch chief named Jade, we called her, whose team brings her the news that some deliverable, let's say a draft memo, is not going to be ready on time, and she feels that anger right away and wants to respond with a harshly worded note, but she pauses, realizes that her staff is trying to do the best they can, responds more calmly. That helps avoid a pothole for the team. I have to say, though, that example is about trying to emphasize values of empathy. You could see a different example where Jade is someone struggling with self-assertion or being direct. And this story could come out much differently, that she sees that her team is not, working up to their potential. She's more direct about responding that they need to raise the bar. So the larger point here is that stopping to think, what values do I want to lead with before you respond?
Thank you. I think it's something I think we could all take a little bit more of. I know the stuff that I've watched from this mindfulness study stuff, and we've talked about it on the show a little bit, but certainly you both crystallize it well in your piece, and for that, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Great to be with you.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler and hosted by me, Ross John Fortuné. We want to thank Andrew Feldman and Marc Margolius for joining the program. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Check us out on the Clubhouse app by searching for GovExec Daily. You can email us any feedback at podcast.Rabbi.com or hit us up on Twitter at GovExec. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.